Welcome to day 2 of the 2023 United States Media Literacy Week, a time in the year when we celebrate the incredible work being done in media literacy education. We challenge ourselves to learn more about media literacy, and we work together to spread the news that media literacy is indeed more important than ever. So I am Michelle Chula-Lipkin. I am the executive director of Namely, and I am honored to be here today moderating the next conversation, which is entitled Insights on How to Build a Civil Digital Ecosystem for Youth. I want to give you a little bit of background on the conversation before we bring our panelists on. So in early 2023, the Digital Wellness Lab and Roblox got together to ask this kind of question, this hypothesis. In 5 to 10 years, online spaces can be more safe and civil than in real life. So this hypothesis was explored with 100 experts from around the globe. And I'm happy and proud to say that I was one of those experts. And we came together to workshop the challenges of this hypothesis and how do we get there. And we worked in 3 kind of pillars, which I thought was a really interesting way to separate the conversation. One was technology innovation. The next was policy. And the third was education and awareness, which not surprisingly, Namely kind of fit into that conversation. So we spent session time online and then came together to collaborate and develop a final set of recommendations for technology leaders, for policy makers, seeking to build a more civil online world. And we're going to talk a little bit with our panelists about these recommendations. I'm not going to go through them now. I'm going to keep them on the screen for a second as we welcome our panelists into the conversation. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stop my share. Hi, I'm so excited for our conversation. And rather than me doing the introductions, I'm going to let each and every one of you tell us who you are and a little bit about your work and specifically how it intersects with this conversation about online civility. So I'm going to actually go in alphabetical order by first name. So Harini, I'm going to start with you. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Hi, I'm Harini. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been working in spaces like this for a few years now. I'm still in school, yay. I'm an undergrad at University of California, San Diego, and I'm going into my 4th year now. I'm studying neurobio and I'm studying sociocultural anthropology. I'm really interested in how stress kind of manifests both biologically and socially, and what we can do as a community to mitigate it from getting a little bit out of control, which I think it's started to in recent years. And I think the place to start with that is digital spaces, because it's a new environment, it's unfamiliar, it's foreign, it's something that we don't really know how to navigate yet, and it's something that young people spend a lot of time on. So that's why I think things like media literacy, things like building the right kind of ecosystems for young people are so important.
Great. Thank you again for being here. Laura, I'm going to go to you now.
You're muted.
Sorry.
That's okay. It happens.
Thank you. I know, such a professional. Thank you so much for inviting me on today, everyone. So I'm Laura Higgins. I'm the Senior Director of Community Safety and Civility at Roblox. So my background is digital safeguarding. I've been with Roblox for about 5 years, and before that I was at the UK Safer Internet Centre, working on the other side, if you like, where I was running helplines and supporting victims of online harm. So this really has been my passion for a long time. In relation to the conversation we're having today, I was really kind of, so happy to be working with our colleagues at both Digital Wellness Lab, but actually all of the experts that came together, but I was able to facilitate a lot of the conversation. So for me, this is one of those projects that I'm pretty certain I'm going to look back on for the rest of my life and just go, wow, we really did that. That was amazing. So I'm so excited to be here that we can share some of this goodness with you all.
That's awesome. Thanks, Laura. Michael.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Rich. I am probably in order of importance, a parent, a pediatrician, an educator, and a child health researcher. I'm the founder and director of the Digital Wellness Lab, which is based at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. But I have to confess that I spent my wicked youth in the film industry as a screenwriter and wannabe director. Never made it past assistant director to Akira Kurosawa. But as I came into medicine, into pediatrics in particular, was right when people were starting to worry about the issue of the effect of then television screens on the physical, mental, and social health of kids. And worked for over a decade with the American Academy of Pediatrics, helping them with their practice policy statements, but became concerned that we were all coming from a negative standpoint, saying screens were terrible, screens were, get them out of kids' bedrooms, cut down the amount of time they watch, rather than recognizing that this is an incredibly powerful force that can be directed for good. And so for the last 20 some years, I've been involved with the Digital Wellness Lab in its former incarnation as the Center on Media and Child Health. And the idea behind this is really, how can we all, as good citizens of the future, work together, bring our respective skill sets to bear on the physical, mental, and social health of children as affected by the screens they use and how they use them. And so it was a real pleasure and as with Laura, a labor of love to pull together people we've been working with for decades, really, around the world, to really think through this. And instead of criticizing each other and trying to restrict and restrain, let's figure out how to synergize with each other by speaking the truth and then acting on it. And that all came together in the Inspired Internet Pledge, which we proposed at Cannes this summer to the tech companies, to the entertainment companies, and frankly, to us all, to really tune our digital ecosystem for emotional wellness, to listen to those who've encountered harm and to act on what we learn, and frankly, to share information, which is something that so far the tech world has not been particularly good at. But we're only talking about information that affects the well-being of their users. And so it is a sea change, but based on this convening and the really positive interactions we had, I am optimistic and hopeful.
Awesome. Thank you. And finally, Yalda.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and for pulling this together. And I had the honor and pleasure of working on this report as well, or really just being at the convenings. A lot of other people did the heavy lifting. I am also a former filmmaker, started my career as a movie executive and worked up to senior vice president in production and development at MGM. My very first movie that I got made was called Mi Familia, My Family, which is a intergenerational story of Mexican American immigrants that I really related to because I'm a daughter of Persian immigrants. And I got into the business because I believe in the power of storytelling. I believe it can change the world. And then I stopped working in the film business when I had my own kids. I have I have a 21-year-old and a 24-year-old, and I decided to get a PhD. Just like Michael, I sort of decided I wanted to transition into the world of academia. And I launched this. So I have a PhD from UCLA in developmental psychology. I studied how digital media impacts the social emotional well-being of adolescents. And then I started the Center for Scholars and Storytellers, which brings together these expertise. We're based at UCLA, where I'm on faculty. And our mission is to harness the power of entertainment media to support the well-being of social and emotional well-being of adolescents ages 10 to 25. And we do that through doing original research, commissioned research. We're holding our summit on Thursday, which will bring together tech companies. We've got Meta, YouTube, everybody, because we believe, and I believe as a former movie executive, that we have to have industry as part of the solution, that we can appeal to them as Laura, represents, to their best selves, and work on, as Dr. Rich just said, to empower young people. We want to minimize harms, but we want to move from a protectionism mindset where it's very top down, and let young people who are really living through these very challenging times, scaffold them, support them, empower them, let them use these tools to change the world, because I believe they can. I'm hopeful.
I feel like there's another webinar that we have to do about people that started in media production and ended up here, because I'm one of them too. So we'll put that on the to-do list maybe for next year. But that is a good segue to kind of how I want to start the conversation. And it's before we kind of dive into the specific recommendations that came from the report. But it is to kind of address the cultural conversation that is going on right now, that does, as far as I'm concerned, lean toward protectionist kind of framing, especially and specifically around social media and the rising legislation with social media bans. And I'm, not surprisingly, in the same a frame of mind of like, how can we talk about education and empowerment and all of that, rather than, this punitive kind of way of thinking about it. So I would love to get your thoughts, all of you, on this cultural conversation that's happening and how we move it, like how we shift it to more of this civility conversation and empowering conversation. So I'm gonna go to you, Harini, first. Certainly your voice matters, not that I'm going to say more than everyone else on this call, but possibly very much more. So yeah, let's start with you, Harini.
Sure, thanks. I mean, again, not to say that my voice matters more, but I do think that it's so important that when we're having these conversations, young people are as involved as possible and are not just sort of an afterthought, but are in kind of like from the ideation stage all the way through research and development, when we're thinking about how to have these conversations and how to innovate tools for young people. It doesn't make sense that far too often they're excluded from the conversation, and far too often there isn't room for them and their voice at the table. So I'm really happy to be here and give you my thoughts. I think when it comes to shifting the cultural conversation, it's really important to understand that being online it isn't something that it's kind of quarantined off to its own separate space. Like existing on a digital kind of platform and existing in a digital environment is sort of becoming very similar to existing in like your own physical spaces, in terms of how it impacts us, and I mean how it impacts all of you. You're all like online as well, and it's not something that can be just sort of like monetary anymore. It's not something that can be considered, oh, we're creating this social media platform, we want to get more people involved, we want to get more people engaged. It's got to be something where, oh, we're creating this new social media platform, so I understand that it's my responsibility that we are raising young people on this platform. We are like, young people are growing up on this platform. This next generation is going to be in a position where everything that they experience online via our platform is going to be something that they will take with them throughout the rest of their lives. And it will snowball into not just great, amazing things. Like, for example, I think we're more socially informed now than ever before, just because there are so many ways to be and there are so many ways to get involved. And we're so much more connected now than we ever have been before. But in the same vein, we're also so much more kind of bogged down by like performative activism and bias and things that we haven't really been taught how to navigate via, again, connecting back to media literacy. And I think it's really important that all in all, when we're figuring out how to navigate these platforms, we feel safe and we feel like there's spaces where we can learn and grow, and not spaces that, with things like cancel culture and things like that, it just kind of forces you to be a certain person and forces you to ascribe to a certain cookie cutter mold. Um, and making it a space for learning and growth and creating conversations around how to inform yourself and maybe what algorithms like TikTok algorithms or even like Instagram explore pages, like how are they affecting us and how are they addictive and why are they making us feel the way that they're making us feel, and how can we be as transparent as possible about what social media is doing to us, both the good and the bad. Again, we don't want it to be this very like protectionist, social media is all bad, it's terrible, because again, like I can't stress enough, and Michael said this numerous times before, as a young person, if you're gonna tell me not to do something, all that's gonna make me want to do is like do it a million times more or prove to you that I can do it, because there's so little space for us to sort of be heard and be seen as capable and be seen as individuals. Um, we're kind of not really asked how we want to change the world. I think we're often just asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then when you grow up, maybe you can change the world. But our lived experience is so valuable. And I think the things that we've experienced in this new age of living in a tech-filled world is so like unheard of, and we don't know how to navigate it, and we don't know where it's coming from, and we don't know where it's going, and that instills a lot of fear. And I think that that's kind of the root of this protectionist mindset, is we're scared of it, we don't know how it's affecting us, so let's just, let's just avoid it entirely. But again, like if we had that mindset, we would still be living in caves, right? We wouldn't be able to evolve. We
Well
wouldn't be
said.
able to, thanks. We wouldn't be able to take these kind of new age, very like powerful, vast ideas and find ways to evolve them and apply them to help us and apply them to our advantage. So I think just feeling safe enough to learn and grow, and feeling like you don't need to come already having all the answers when you're presenting yourself online. There's also a huge pressure to be very kind of, whatever I post online and whatever I present online is already fully fleshed out, perfect, hyper idealized. There's a lack of wiggle room. There's a lack of space to grow. And I think because of that, we sort of feel trapped and we don't know how social media is impacting us, but it's almost like there isn't really space to learn that because we should already know it by now. And if we can just normalize learning how these things are affecting us, I think that that would really shift us into a new age of not only not villainizing social media and not villainizing online spaces, but also being able to understand how to best use them to our advantage.
There's so many things there that I wish I could just like, I'm gonna make lots of like social media posts from all the things you just said already. But the questions that you're asking, I think, are so important. I love in particular what you said about these platforms are raising humans. I think that's a really powerful statement, and something that I think that we all have to reflect on for sure. And I just think that this idea that young people want to be seen as capable is something that I heard from you too, that really like stuck with me, and I'm going to be thinking about that quite a bit. So Michael, why don't we go to you and then we'll continue. You can respond to Harini, but also we're just talking about shifting that cultural conversation.
Well, there's a part of me that says we should have dropped the mic after Harini.
Yeah, right. Like, thanks for coming. Yeah.
But I do want to put in there that one of the things that we based this whole digital civility convening on was the concept of civility is not just being kind. There's this, sort of feeling like, again, that's part of the protectionist mindset when you look at people trolling each other and taking advantage of each other in this space. It's really about being respectful and being authentic with each other. And what Harini said is really important, that it doesn't need to be perfect. It is a chance for a dialogue or a multi-log, really. And it is a chance to be heard with respect and to respond with respect. I think one of the really interesting things we learned from we have a student advisory council that we actually reconstitute each year. But the first one last year ended up with this idea of the Inspired Internet Pledge. But one of the really interesting things that was said was by one of the students was, we've had hundreds of thousands of years to figure out how to talk to each other face to face with respect, with authenticity, with courage. And we've had less than 2 decades to figure it out online. And so how are we supposed to, enter this really very empowered, very powerful space, and we're not using the same techniques? One of the things I want to push back on a little bit on Harini, she's used to me arguing with things, is this concept of the social media algorithms being addictive. As part of what we do at Boston Children's Hospital, I also have a clinic, the Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders, where we actually work with those kids who've gone down the rabbit hole of gaming, of social media, of pornography, of what we call information binging, which is the endless YouTube, Reddit, Quora. We have yet to see a young person who fits the mold of an addict or addiction. I think addiction is a really problematic word in relation to this, because if you think of addiction in terms of substance use disorders, it's use of a pleasurable but not necessary substance for life that continues despite negative consequences. And our goal in treating them is abstinence. Interactive media are a resource we cannot live without. They are necessary for education, for communication, for social life, for work. And so it's a different thing altogether. And the word addict or addiction keeps people from care. What we're actually seeing is young people who actually are struggling with psychological issues we already understand and can treat, like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety disorders, depression, et cetera, that are escaping to the online space as a safer, more mastered space for them. They feel safer there. And unfortunately, because of other people's behavior there, often feel worse after being in those spaces. And so I want to also say that the problem with the word addiction is that you can blame it on something else rather than understanding that it's your own behavior and the behavior of your peers that are taking this to positive or negative places.
Harini, did you want to say anything about that particular point?
Wait, I think that's a great point, and I'd never thought of it that way. And it's also kind of making me think about the fact that, like, why hadn't I ever thought of it that way, right? And why didn't I know that words like addiction can be problematic in that sense, right? And why before this panel did I barely understand the concept of digital civility? And why aren't we teaching young people, the people who are kind of running the show in a lot of ways, what these things are and how to understand these things, how to navigate these things? And I think it's really, really important that we can have open conversations like this, right? And we can be able to say, like what addiction truly is, right? And addiction in like a very biological sense is very different than how we use it colloquially. And maybe that is like, that's something that we should start moving away from. And that's something that we should make an effort to start hindering, but it's so difficult to know what's right and what's wrong and what a lot of these terms are and how to understand exactly what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And it almost like I like really appreciate the pushback, because I think that it's important that no one source is like the end all be all, right and wrong, and it's constantly a conversation and it's constantly a back and forth. So thanks, Michael.
Well,
No,
and I will push back on one other thing real
Oh,
quickly.
wait.
Okay,
Let's
go,
move it away from
Like,
right and wrong as a moral or values thing and move it toward healthy and less healthy, right? Because
Yeah. that's
right
good.
and wrong, you can get into all kinds of arguments over what's right and what's wrong. And words do matter in this. So
Yeah, and I love that,
Sorry.
Michael, that you bring that up, because also I think one of the reasons is we use the word addiction culturally, and adults use it a lot with young people. So I am sure that that has come up with fingers pointing at you, so we have to check ourselves. So Laura, and then I want to hear from Yalda too on these points.
Thank you. And I'll try to be succinct, but this was such a great conversation already. So I'm not one of the cool kids. I did not work in the film industry before I got into digital safeguarding. I was a drugs worker. I ran needle exchanges. I worked for street homeless alcoholics.
Wow.
So I really would say, yes, I totally agree. Also, I absolutely hate the abstinence model, because that's all that people have in terms of treatment, and that's really terrible. So if we could apply the same conversation to the world of substance misuse and physical health, we'd be really doing well. But yeah, that's actually my background. So that just really made me chuckle that we've gone down this path. I agree with everything.
But yeah.
And
so
talk
a little, your points about like shifting.
Two other bits about shifting. So one,
Right.
Again, picking up on Michael, you mentioned about people and where they can feel that they can thrive online and go to spaces where they can find like-minded people, sometimes find information. It can be good or bad information, but they can at least go and talk to people who've lived a similar experience. So we're just working on a program at the moment here in the UK with one of our partners, specifically focused on neurodiverse families. And quite often we know it's not just the kids, it's the parents as well. And we're having this whole conversation about, what does online gaming look like for you? Where's the good? Where's the bad? Where's the ugly? Where can we learn? So kind of building on the project that we've all worked on together with a really specific group. And you know what? I know we feel that young people who have vulnerabilities, actually what we're hearing is that them and their families, that is their safe space. They're having less of the negative stuff than I think we would all perceive. More to come on that. Maybe that's a conversation for next year's Media Literacy Week. And then right back to shifting the conversation. And this is just an anecdote of why we're still so stuck. My husband this morning literally went, I've just seen this amazing TV ad. It's one of our big mobile phone companies, cell phone companies here in the UK have just done a campaign for young people about can't sleep, not getting things done, blah, blah, blah. They've obviously put in some controls, user controls, where they can switch things off so their phone's not pinging through the night. He went, this is amazing. Like, this kid's suddenly like brushing his teeth, going to college on time, all of these things. And then I went, and he's like, oh, better than this endless scrolling that kids do. I went, well, I'm just going to go and get plugged in now and go to work. He went, no, that's different because it's your job. And I just went, why is it different? I'm going to be sitting in front of a computer for at least another 10 hours now. And yes, some of that's going to be social, some of it's work. But actually, I'm more plugged in than my son, who's been in and out of the house all day doing actual healthy, real world things. So this isn't just a big government regulatory thing we have to shift. It starts with us and the people around us and having these conversations broadly. And hopefully we can start to change the sort of the viewpoint on some of these things, because there's so much stereotype led by media. But I will be quiet now. Over to you, Yalda.
I love that. Yalda, I see your head nodding, so I'm just gonna.
Oh God, I love that story, that anecdote. That's so perfect. And I mean, I do think, and our whole theory at the center is to go where the young people actually are and help, maximize the positive, minimize the harm. And we know, like, popular media is constantly using the fact that Harini said, I didn't know about this addiction word. And my kids have heard me say that all my all my academic life, it's not addiction, it's not addiction. And they're still using these words. And that's because it's in the newspapers, it's in the media, it's on social media, it's on TikTok, it's probably in ChatGPT, although it's maybe it has a caveat there, but it is so important for us to shift the way that popular media talks about these things. And it starts with the grownups, but we are always right here. We're preaching to the converted, like all of us are the converted. So how do we get out there, to a much broader community and sort of get to the point where we're not speaking from this moral panic point of view, which, many people in the academic communications world knows every new media starts a moral panic. One of those was the book. Many years ago, people were really worried about teenagers reading books. Can you imagine that, Harini? Can you imagine your parents going, "Oh my God, stop reading"? But literally there were headlines in the library saying that, boys are spending way too much time in the library and it's all their parents' fault. And the problem with a lot of stuff is we're saying, parents, you've got to take care of it. This is true. Parents have to be involved. We're all saying teens, like that ad. Teens, you set the controls, you do this, and then all of a sudden you'll be fine and you'll be able to focus and go to college. We're putting all this onus on these people, and we also need to include industry. And, Michelle and I were talking earlier on, where's the place the teens are? Where is the place adolescents are? They're on this stuff. We all are on this stuff. Can we build systems within this that feel authentic, that don't feel top down, put on your timer, kiddo, and actually engage a young person to start thinking critically for themselves, building media literacy into the platforms, not making a pullout that, teachers, where we're in an education system where teachers, are doing way too much. We're putting the onus on teachers, parents, teens, and then regulators are coming in after the fact and saying, take it away, let's work with industry. Let's figure out a way to start at the entry point, bring teens into making sure those messages are authentic, and start to shift it, as I said, from protectionism to empowerment with scaffolding. Because teens, sometimes people say, oh, just hand teens, the devices and they'll fix everything. No, they need our wisdom too.
Love it. Oh, this is great. Okay, so many hands. I don't even need to be here. Harini.
I think that's really interesting that you brought that up, Yelda, because there's a strange dichotomy between what we're told are, again, right, not right and wrong, but healthy and not healthy habits. And I'm learning, and I really don't know what is a healthy habit online. And specifically, I wanted to ask about, everyone knows that like pediatricians will say 2 hours of screen time. And I'm like, is that really realistic for anyone? Because my entire school day, I'm on the computer. Relaxing, I'm on the computer. Like everything, I'm watching TV, I'm on my phone. A million different things, work, pleasure, whatever. Talking to my friends, even things that I feel like are like me disconnecting, being on the phone with my family. Like, how could I possibly limit to 2 hours of screen time a day?
How can you even measure your screen time?
Right.
We live in a world where there's screens everywhere. They're in our pockets, they're on our wrists. It's not like sitting in front of a television for programs anymore.
Yeah, you can't get into a taxi without seeing a screen, right?
Exactly.
No, I think that's but Harini, what you're speaking to is just that what I hear is someone hungry for some information that you're not getting, right?
Tell me what to do.
Like, tell me, like, help me
do.
out. I want to be healthy.
Wants to be told what to do, and they want to be told it's good, it's bad, it's healthy, it's not healthy. You know what? It's not that simple. I mean, everything that I've said is, and I was worried about my own child being addicted to video games, but my child was eating, My child was sleeping. Sleep is huge. Like that is certainly important. My child was doing well in school. My child was socializing. All these other metrics were fine. Media was out of control. But you know what? They were healthy. So, ultimately you can't put these stringent rules of time. You can't put these stringent rules of this is the way, I like the 3 C's: child, context, content. Thinking about your individual, how's it making me feel? What context? Are you using it for work? Are you using it for school? Are you using it to socialize? Are you using it for some escape? And then content. Content is so important, and we don't talk about that enough. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Laura, I jumped in.
That's
and
okay.
it
No, I love
No,
the passion.
I
Laura.
am also such an advocate, but over here in the UK, we would talk about the conduct as well, which also goes in there. So I'm a big fan of that, Yelda. So, and I think everyone's kind of spoken to this, just bringing back a little bit to the workshops that we held and some of the findings. So, we had this in-person convening at the end of it where we kind of went, okay, we've had these huge discussions, and then what do we bring out of it? Well, we managed to vote down to this really small list of recommendations, but I think we very deliberately left them super top level. These are not prescriptive things, because thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I want to put them
Perfect.
up again because I want to dive into them. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I say, I think deliberately we were like, one of the things that we're seeing governments do, regulators do, is these very, very prescriptive things, some of which, because there's this lack of communication between the industry, between NGOs and what they need, and then what governments are looking for, there's this disconnect where people don't necessarily understand. Well, it's okay to say we want this tool, but actually nobody's ever invented that tool. It doesn't exist yet. Doesn't mean we can't work towards it, but we need to collectively work together to make any of these things achievable. So when we were talking from this point of recommendations, it's like, these are more the things we want you to think about, as opposed to you must implement this particular safety tech tool because it's going to make all the difference or whatever. And the only way that I think, for all of us and Michael's team and some of the participants, we're all like, what do we do now? And hopefully we're going to dig down into some of these recommendations to come up with some actual helpful solutions for people. And they might not be the tech solution. We're still a long way from that, but we can kind of hone into each of these topics. But for me, the biggest thing, both, as I say, just being a part of this process was such an honor. But I think hopefully the biggest message collectively we can share from the experience is that we all have to work together. This is not a tech solution. This is not something that governments can regulate because they don't really understand how these things work. We need academia and research. We need young people's involvement. We need people just with lived experience, whether young people or adults who've been victims of online harm or experience. Collectively, everybody has to come together to try to find the bigger solutions for some of these topics.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that's important that we came to is that we as a society are often, as Yalda alluded to, seeking a binary answer to a complex and nuanced question, just cut it off or stop it or restrict it and everything is fine. And the reality is that it's much more nuanced and it's much more of a work in progress, and it will always be a work in progress than it is something that we can fix, right, and be done with. As Harini said so accurately, when you create restrictions, it makes it the forbidden fruit, and the kids are going to be right there saying, well, if this is only for adults, I'm there. Right?
I thought you said that, Michael, and Harini was echoing your words.
Oh, well, that's maybe, I don't know. Anyway, but I think that what's really important about the guidelines that we came up with is that it really does involve all of our input to do the design. And I think it is so important not just to have the young people involved, but to let them lead. It shouldn't be about us without us, is what they say. And that's so very important because they're the ones who are going to have to live in and lead this world, not us.
So let's dive into a few of the recommendations. I also want to say that anyone that is listening in, if you have any questions and you want to put them in the chat, please do. So let's go with what Michael just said. So one of the suggestions, one of the recommendations, I should say, is involve youth meaningfully in the design of apps, platforms, policies, and resources. So I think we've been very clear that we all agree with that. I'm wondering, Harini, if you have any thoughts on the how to do that. Like, what would it mean to you if you were involved meaningfully with a new app or talking to one of the big platforms? Like, can you talk a little bit about what that could look like, or what you want it to look like?
I could talk more than a little bit about what I want this to look like.
Go ahead.
Honestly, the biggest thing that I think, the biggest caveat to navigating this is like, I'm here on this panel, yay. I am not like every young person. I am not all young people. I can't speak for the many here. I haven't talked to every young person. Like, I don't know every, like, it's really difficult to kind of be like, I guess, boxed in as this, like, I am the youth experience and I can speak on behalf of the youth experience, because I can't. Like, I can speak on behalf of my experience, but that's like all I really feel qualified to do. And I don't know if like it's feasible, but I think in an ideal world, like, I don't know how to make it feasible, but I want the root of youth engagement and involvement in creating like a more meaningful digital experience is, how can we involve not just a young person, but as many youth voices as possible, to the point where that is what shifts the tides, and that is what becomes the strongest decision-making factor in terms of how we approach creating meaningful spaces, right? It's like, not just what do the young people think and asking someone, but it's like, what do the young people think and asking like a generation, and getting people as involved as possible, and not just in a capacity of like, hey, look, we're going to ask you to beta test our app, but like, hey, look, we want to know what you think, because what you think is the most valuable piece of the puzzle right now, because we need to know how to make these environments something that you want them to be. And I think we're so used to not having that autonomy that, like, even now I like find myself asking, like, tell me what to do, tell me what healthy habits are, and I'll adopt them, or I'll at least try. Like, I don't know what to do, and I don't feel like I'm the one who's qualified to know what to do. But how can we shift that conversation, and how can we level the playing field to a certain extent? Because if we can, it's in reactions, but also I'll just throw it to you after.
You go right to Yalda after. She wants to raise her hand.
Like, I think that by opening the conversation and like teaching young people that our lived experience is valuable, and it's something that not only is needed, but also is something that, like, you personally and what you've gone through and what you have to say is what we need to hear right now for this new age kind of civil digital environment, right? To create civility and to create an environment that you want to exist on, we're asking you, because we never ask, like, and we never think to do that. And it's so frustrating to be in a position where I think there is a lot of, now that people are finally, I think, starting to prioritize youth mental health, and it's finally becoming an industry priority. I think there is a lot of this kind of performative, we care about young people because that's what the industry cares about. But are we showing that in, like, straight from the get-go? Like, are we showing that in our R&D? Are we showing that in how we approach, like, revolutionizing different platforms and revolutionizing different systems? And I think, yeah, there's a lot to learn, and there's a long way to go as a young person, but like at any different stage, there's a lot to learn and there's a long way to go, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, how can we create a back and forth conversation where I'm learning from you just as much as you're learning from me? Yalda.
See, I don't need to be here.
You really really don't. But we are very glad you are. So I am, this is going to sound like a plug, but I couldn't, it really, what Harini was talking about really sounds like a program we have for youth, where we are teaching youth. First of all, we're having youth survey that we're doing youth participatory action research, which many people know about, many young academics do it, where we're having youth. We ask them a question around how they want to see themselves portrayed, how they want the media companies to work, and they go back and talk to their own communities and they research within their own community. So it's not just their voice, it's a voice of 50 to 100 young people. And then we teach them how to share that information with storytellers. So in our world, it's probably writers and directors and screenwriters, but because young people should be at the table. They should be, but they should be, would be better if they were reflecting more than just one person, you know, if they're able to understand that they're part of a larger community and that they can represent a larger community. And the second piece is to learn how to productively have a conversation with the people creating the content. That's where you're going to, or creating the tech, that's where you're going to have the most impact. You know, I like to say I spent 10 to 15 years in the business learning how to talk to storytellers. It's a skill. And so, you know, while young people, you know, have so many important things to say, if they can learn how to communicate in a way that'll be most impactful for the end user in the tech companies, I think they will have more impact. And I think it's really, really critical to support young, and then they'll learn too. They'll learn how to work within the system and go out into the system and break down the frickin' system. You know, so that's my Berkeley liberal background coming out.
I do have to say though, because what I hear is that there's like, it's not just ask them about the process, it's have them within the process, right? Like it's about an authentic kind of, you know, a powerful place in the conversation to build these together. And I keep hearing over and over again about collaboration. And one thing I really appreciated about this whole process was how many different voices were in the room, which is great. So let's just keep going, because I do want to get to a few more of the, at least two more of the recommendations. Let's go to, you were talking, Alda, a lot about scaffolding, and one of the recommendations, build platform onboarding processes that teach and activate civility-focused norms and expectations. And I think when I mean, even in the conversations, like that seems like the most obvious thing that we should be doing. And like, why are we doing it? And can you speak a little bit more about the importance of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I said earlier, and I love that you guys had that recommendations is going to where they already are. I mean, you have a parent has the strongest leverage, a teacher has the strongest leverage, you know, when they're onboarding, when you're giving them the device, when they are getting onto social media or gaming. That's the place where a young person is most open and interested, and you might have some ability to work with them, and that's where they already are. You're not pulling them out of their space. You know, you're not saying, oh, you've got to learn this in your computer lab, or you've got to learn this in your history class. You're saying you're learning it where you already are. And if the tech companies can actually work with academics and advocates and young people to actually create onboarding systems, then I feel like that's where we could have the most impact. And I would love to hear from Laura, because you are representing the tech companies here. You know, why do you think I know we're playing catch up and we're reactive, and now there are a lot of people trying to make this work, but how could we get people to do this proactively? The second they, like, as Harini said, the second they're creating something, you know.
I love that. And thank you. You know, this is like my favorite panel ever. I feel like it's just all the friends in one space. These are great conversations. You know, one of the things we've always talked about is that you can't just retrofit things comfortably into platforms. You know, we talk a lot. Everyone will have probably heard about safety by design. Trust by design is a model that we use at Roblox. but it does mean that you build with that kind of authenticity. Yes, of course, you're always going to tweak. Hopefully, you're going to keep iterating. You're going to keep building better things and innovating. But there has to be a level where it's like, this is actually the purpose of this platform. And so a platform like ours, and we still have a long way to go. We're on a journey. And actually, there was still so much learning that happened through the process of these workshops that we're like, okay, what does that look like for us? There's one thing to go, hey, there's these recommendations. We're now like, what does that look like for Roblox community? What is the experience when somebody first signs up? What is the experience for a parent compared to a child when they first sign up? So I think challenges, one is platforms just, that kind of move fast, break things mentality. That's worked for some companies, but I don't think when we're having these conversations it's particularly helpful. It really needs to be not just, yes, youth should be central if it's a platform that young people are using, but it should just be about your community. Who are your community? What do they need? How can we support them for the second they get here? One of the other things that we really got as a takeaway is that civility and media/digital literacy go so closely hand in hand. It is really hard without spoiling a user's experience when they come on a platform to suddenly put all these interstitials that go, hold on a minute, we want to teach you something about digital literacy, and then they can't play the game that they want to play. So there is a delicate balance of the user experience and what they're coming to do, and then how we help to tip that balance towards that civil interaction, helping them. We talked a lot through the workshops about keeping people in the green zone. And what we meant by that is before things escalate and they have to go to punishments or sanctions, is keeping people where they're kind of regulating their own behavior to a degree so that they don't become problematic on a platform. And I think if we can all collectively keep having these conversations, whether it be, we talked about all sorts of things, whether it's a bot when you first join, whether it's just making community standards and the rules of the platform really easy to understand and upfront, codes of conduct, those sorts of things, I think they're going to be really key in changing this narrative. And at the same time, when we talk about media and digital literacy, some of it has to happen on platform, but schools, everybody has a part to play in this, so that young people also have a basic of, it doesn't matter what platform, whether I'm playing GTA or Roblox, I'm still going to behave in a civil fashion on those platforms.
Michael.
I think part of what we have to do is also to shift our frame from tech companies being purveyors and us as consumers, and realize that we're actually a community, and that we are entering this not as someone who is buying their way into a game or into a social media environment, so that then the company owes me something, so much as I am joining a community and I am as responsible as everyone else to maintain the standards of this community, to make it a community that I want to be in. And so it really is about citizenship and about empowering everyone to call each other out if they're overstepping or if they're making the community less good. I often talk about, with parents about don't make media rules, because rules are made to be broken. Have expectations. Because first of all, expectations apply to everyone in the family, including dad and mom with their all important smartphones with work stuff on them. But that we have expectations of when we're at dinner, we are together without screens. When we are at night, we are without screens, et cetera. And ultimately, rules versus expectations, it is much easier to have mom pissed off at you than to have mom disappointed in you.
That was very wise.
Yeah, that was very wise. That's going to take me a second to recover from. So just calling attention. So some of the other recommendations that we're not going to have time to dive into, but I did share the link of the full report with you. We talked about this quite a bit, though. The commit across the tech and media industries to co-create and adhere to policies that are positively framed and encourage growth. design, deploy, and continually improve accessible civility resources, which is wonderful. So I definitely encourage everyone to look at the report, and I'm, eager. One of the things that I thought was so interesting is to be in a room with so many people that care about this issue and are doing something was such a positive experience. Because I think, as always, whether it's the news media or the way that it's really the news media and even legislators are talking about this stuff, it's a very binary conversation. Like you said, Michael, it's very much, this is bad and we have to do something about it. And that's why, like, going back to the hypothesis, which was in 5 to 10 years, online spaces can be more safe and civil. Like, that is a really great starting point. And I appreciate that that's the starting point. So we have just a couple more minutes. So I wanted to give just like everyone one more thing that they are dying to say, something that they didn't say. But I think, Harini, like, if there's anything that you can share of just like what you think we need to keep in mind that maybe you haven't shared yet as we continue this work. Maybe that's the question for everyone. So think about it.
I think that's a good question for everyone.
Thank you. Do you want to go first, or like I'm putting you on the spot?
Well, I'm already talking, so I might as well.
It's perfect.
I think something to keep in mind going forward, and keep in mind as we're all part of this conversation, is I think I almost want to hone in on something that Yalda said earlier, which is that we're sort of we're preaching to the people here who agree, who wholeheartedly agree, and who want to make this change. And it's like a smaller population of us than I think we realize, because it's easy to agree with something that's like, yeah, let's be better, let's be healthier, let's do things right, like, yeah, and that's kind of all we really know. But when it comes to going down into the nitty-gritty of what that means and how we can actually approach doing that, there is very little like understanding generally of what to do and how to support efforts like this. And I think, as Laura said as well, the suggestions that we came up with in when we convened finally, like, I think that they were so valuable, but they can also be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And I think they're very open-ended, and that in their own way, like, that gives them power. But in the same vein, how can we make sure that there's clarity and understanding? Because I think it's very well known that if people don't understand something, they're just not gonna do it. Like, if it's not clearly laid out, it's not going to happen, and there is no clear answer. So figuring out how to approach talking about things like this with us, like, to whatever extent of clarity we can, and facilitating understanding in a way that it not only feels like a safe environment to learn new things. I learned so many new things on this panel, and I'm so grateful that I learned so many new things on this panel. But being able to have this conversation with someone who feels like they already know, I guess, like, how do we approach doing that? And I think that that's something that we didn't really get a chance to touch on. And like maybe just like 6 more panels would cover. Like,
I was like, we're gonna stay on for another 3 hours.
How many more panels we need to cover it all? But like, so I guess instead of answering the question, I will pose another question in addition to your question, Michelle, which is like, what do we do there? How do we do that?
Okay, I'm gonna Laura, Michael, and then Yalda, you'll have the final word.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Harini. We need many more panels.
And I'm going to be really, really quick and succinct. And this was before you threw the question at me as well, Harini. But the answer is, that was just the start of the process. Yeah. We got the conversation going. It's a work in progress. We have these collective goals, and now the hard work begins. Now it is about, what does that actually look like? And one size will not fit all. We know that there are lots of, amazing projects that are like voluntary principles or various things, but actually applying them to everyone's platforms can be difficult because we all have different, Roblox is a games platform, but we're not a gaming platform, and we're not social media. And, that can be quite difficult to navigate, but helping people to go, this is the process for my platform and my audience, my community. Here's how I have to interpret that. That's going to be the next steps for us, I think.
Awesome. Michael.
And that is what the Inspired Internet Pledge is about, is to pledge to certain principles that then you apply within the context of your own platform, your own application, the ways that you can tune for emotional well-being and respond to those who are hurt and share information with each other. I have to note that while we've been speaking in this past hour, the news just broke that 33 states have sued Meta for exploiting children's mental health for profit. So, here, it's happening as we speak, that, the hammer's being dropped. And frankly, when I talk at panels like this, I feel like this is such an incredible waste of human energy and resources to fighting with each other when we could learn.
I thought you meant the panel, Michael. I was
No. I think these constant attacks back and forth of people who did not learn in kindergarten to play well with each other, right? And what we're about. I also don't want to diminish the value of preaching to the choir or preaching to the converted, because the converted not only believe this stuff, but they are constantly hearing from us, first of all, new information. Harini and I have exchanged new information, but also they're the ones who can be activated to do something about it, right? It's not just talking about it, it's doing something about it. It's talking about people who do think, as Harini says, that they already know the answers, because none of us know the answers. Let's acknowledge that we don't know the answers, and we are always in a state of becoming. Let's stay in that state, and let's encourage others to build the kind of world, the ecosystem that they want to live in, because you know what? It is no longer an online and an offline world. It's one world. Yeah. And we move seamlessly between them.
Love that. Okay, Yalda, no pressure.
Okay,
Final
we're
word.
over. So, and I know we have other meetings, but I think really just inclusion. I mean, inclusion of adolescents, inclusion of tech, inclusion of parents, inclusion of academics, just inclusion and curiosity. So not bringing more people and not assuming that person's the enemy. If you assume they're the enemy, or if that you assume that, the adolescent doesn't know what they're doing and they need to be told, you are going to make them reactive and defensive, and they will not be working with you. And if you start from a place of, binary, and you're not open and curious and you want to learn, we're not going to be able to accomplish our goals. So those are just, basic values, but I think, the whole world can use it more, but in this space, I really believe we need it.
Great. Okay, Harini, one more.
Really quick. I know that we're over time, but rules.
I actually have to go, so I'm going to jump. Bye.
Thank you so much
for having me.
We're losing our panelists, Harini. One more thought.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I know that we're over time, but as Michael said, rules are meant to be broken. And I just wanted to say, I'm really, really grateful that I got to speak with all of you today and have this conversation. I'm really grateful to you, Michelle, for organizing this whole thing, and to Kayla also, who isn't here but really organized a lot of stuff.
She has. Shout out to Kayla.
And to you, Michael, and to you, Laura. I've learned so much from both of you, and just my entire experience, working with Boston Children's Hospital and Roblox and everything like that. I can't even put into words how valuable it was, and I hope that I think that it's so important that we voice that having these conversations is not only important, but also just not only important in a larger kind of bigger picture sense, but just for me personally, I think it's really important for growing towards who I want to be.
I love that, Harini, and more to come.
Yes. Oh, you're not getting rid of us anytime soon. Thank you all so much. Thank you everyone who watched. Happy Media Literacy Week. Keep tons of events coming up. We'll talk soon. Thank you all so much.
Be well, all.
Bye.